Don't mind just kind of stating, where you live, kind of where you work, um, your company, your position that you work in, and things of kind of that nature.
Awesome, Jake. Well, first off, thanks for having me. This is going to be a great experience for everybody.
Whoa, 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 not just yet. You're probably wondering a few things. One, who is this guy? Two, why are they doing whatever they're doing in a golf cart? And three, why should I care? All valid questions. Allow me to explain. A few years back, I decided to embark on a journey. Not really like that. Or that. There you go. That's more like it. And if I'm honest, this journey was originally intended for the sole purpose of, well, there's not really any way of sugarcoating it. I wanted to make my resume look a little better. Come on. You can't really blame me. In these unprecedented times, nothing's promised. All we can really do is leave our mark on a world that will either really appreciate it, or, well, neglect to even acknowledge it. And I imagine at this point you're thinking to yourself, who invited the good news bear? Something like that. But then everything started to change. Everyone on the planet gained a common enemy, and then somehow it started to divide us. And you can't help but wonder, how are we going to get back to our version of normalcy? Who will lead us back to our version of normalcy?
Then it hit me. Maybe there's a reason it's not that black and white. We may never get back to our version of normal, and whether or not that's a good or a bad thing, we do have to learn to work with each other again. And we're going to need to dig deeper than the surface, into an unforeseen area, into that gray area. Hello all, and welcome to That Gray Area. I'm your host, Jake Desuyo. That Gray Area is a series that I have created for the sole purpose of gaining insight as to how various industries' most valuable leaders are able to operate successfully in a workforce and society that has evolved tremendously over the course of the last few decades. A little background on myself. I was born and raised just south of Jacksonville, Florida. I currently reside in St. Augustine, Florida. Baseball consumed much of my life until I graduated from playing in college, at the same college that I received my bachelor's degree in psychology. I tried coaching afterwards. It only lasted about 2 years. Some ex-players are able to thrive as coaches. I just wasn't one of them. It just made me miss taking the field every single day. So I did like most of us do, and I entered the workforce in a field that my education made me familiar with, the mental health field. And unlike much of today's youth and a lot of people in my own generation, I did understand that I needed to start somewhere, even if that meant starting at the bottom, which is exactly what I did. And I progressed in the same company ever since. And all the while, I was working on my master's degree in organizational leadership, which I was able to achieve in 2019. And as fate would have it, the year afterwards, 2020, I was presented the opportunity to continue furthering my education in the field of leadership, as I have since completed all my courses, my doctoral strategic leadership program, ultimately leading me to this point, completing my doctoral project, speaking to you in that gray area. And I would be remiss not to mention that during this time, I married my best friend, Kirsten, and our beautiful baby boy, Callum, was born in July of 2022. Before we begin, there are two things to remember as we take this journey together. One, this series is not to fulfill any sort of agenda. Other than gaining insight, there are no right or wrong answers. You may actually find that some of our interviewees have entirely different perspectives. And two, the interviewees were selected based solely on their resume. In fact, most of them were respondents to an ad that I initially posted calling on leaders of all industries. Not to mention, selecting them for any other reason contradicts the entire premise of this series. Get ready to journey into that gray area. Now that formal introductions are out of the way, you may or may not be wondering why the name That Gray Area. Well, it's what I personally deemed as a small bubble that successful leaders must operate in to remain sensitive in today's more emotionally and mentally fragile workforce, while carrying over and instilling some of the life lessons that they were able to accrue on their rise to leadership in a less fragile workforce. And by emotionally and mentally fragile, I'm referring to those that at first the old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me, and today view things like constructive criticism as grounds for a potential lawsuit. And to those that have decided to prioritize no-effort characteristics over traits that people work tirelessly to obtain and develop. And by no-effort characteristics, I'm referring to traits that we as people simply don't have to put in effort into obtaining. For example, I would not want someone to select me for a position over a more qualified candidate simply because I'm male or my Filipino heritage. I want them to select me because I'm the best person for the job. Therefore, leaders are faced with a decision. They can either fall victim to the mob at the expense of a flourishing business, disregard modern-day societal expectations entirely and wind up in court every other weekend, or find a way to walk the line that allows for compromise and master the art of operating in that gray area.
Let's get you caught up. There you go. That's better.
My name's John Scromolo. I'm currently the coordinator of district athletics for Clay County District Schools.
My name is Nick Talby. I am the assistant store manager at a local Publix here in Florida.
Thanks, Jake. So I'm Wayne Marshall, and I'm the vice president of UF Health North.
Nicky Matheny. I'm the owner of North Star Sales and Marketing, LLC. We're in Orange Park, Florida.
Slow down there, Grandpa. Hey there, me again. Oh, no, that actually wasn't some sort of sly remark on that guy's age. It's actually my grandfather. I felt it was kind of necessary to give a brief intro as to who he is and why his perspective is worth your time. Actually, you know what? Yeah, that's better. Why all these people are worth lending your ear. Our next interviewee here, Mr. Nicholas Talby, has spent the last 2 decades working in one of the most dominant grocery chains in the southeast region of the United States, Publix supermarkets. Nick will go into detail about some of his experiences throughout his time at Publix. However, one of the main reasons that Nick is an ideal candidate to have their brains picked as to how to operate in that gray area is not only his tenure and leadership position in such a successful franchise, but his experience training, supervising, and interacting with people of all generations, therefore giving him a solid foundation as to how to navigate the interaction component of that gray area. This gentleman right here, Mr. Scromolo, he was one of the purest hitters in baseball that I was able to witness firsthand in my life, probably why he got drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers. After retiring from professional baseball, John quickly climbed the ladder in our nation's education system, eventually becoming the first ever countywide athletic administrator in his county's history. And it's likely his position of leadership was created specifically for him because of some unique traits and perspectives that he possesses. Not to mention, he works directly with the younger generation on a daily basis, making him a perfect candidate to interview as to how to operate in that gray area. Our third interviewee here, Mr. Wayne Marshall, serves as our leader who represents the medical and healthcare field. And if I'm honest, being that I was aware of who Mr. Marshall was prior to this series and the leadership position that he occupied, it was always my intent to sit down with him and pick his brain at some point. What I wasn't aware of upon entering my interview with Mr. Marshall was how deep his roots of his knowledge of his medical field went back. Although Mr. Marshall's job title alone indicates that he's obtained and maintained a position of pristine leadership, the insight that he's able to provide from his experience in his current company and military prior allows for anyone listening to gain tremendous insight as to how to operate in and perceive that gray area altogether. And finally, our last interviewee, my grandfather, Mickey Matheny. Although interviewing my own grandfather can be considered remiss, I challenge anyone with that perspective to sit down with him for even 5 minutes and talk shop. And I can almost guarantee that such a perception would be modified. I've always possessed an admiration for his success and work ethic, but his ability to remain relevant in an ever-evolving workforce while utilizing much of the same technique he's always used, it kind of suggests that he has found a way to apply old world values and meet new world standards. Begging the question, how exactly are you able to walk the line and operate in that gray area?
Feel free to view the bottom right corner to remain aware of which interviewee is speaking at any given moment.
Also be sure to follow along with the avatars that periodically pop up as our guests are speaking, referencing instances of leadership theory.
Back to the show.
I was born in Virginia Beach and moved to Florida when I was 5 years old. I've come from a military background. My grandfather was in the Navy. My father was in the Marines.
And I also have cardiology, neurology, neurosurgery, orthopedics and trauma one under my realm also.
I've been with Publix for 20 years now, and started from the bottom as a front service clerk, which is what we call the packing position. Worked my way up through customer service, so became a cashier, and then office staff, which is the first leadership position. We call it a position leading to management.
We have contracts for 8 states in the Southeast, and we represent about $45 to $50 million a year sales volume. We also provide industry-specific sales seminars and sales plans for companies to help them achieve their budgets and sales goals.
Out of high school, got one offer to play college baseball, and took that up at Flagler College, and played there for 4 years. Got my bachelor's in business administration, and was blessed enough to get drafted by the Los Angeles Dodgers, and played 2 years in their system, and then started my coaching career. Coached high school for 7 years at Ridgeview High School. Also became the athletic director, and then during COVID 2020 in July, became Clay County's first ever county athletic director, and been doing that ever since. And this school year will be starting year number 3.
It's not a natural born leader, but through some of my own homework and leaders investing in me, I've been able to learn to lead others.
My first job was selling ladies' shoes at Butler's Shoe Store when I was 16 years old. That was in 1966. I worked out to about $40 a week. But you have to understand that gas cost 39 cents a gallon back then. A pack of Marlboros was 30 cents.
I spent 24 years in the Air Force. I was what was called an independent duty medic. We work in lieu of physicians at remote sites. In other words, we go to PA school and we do all the stuff for seeing sick call and doing all of that. I did that for a long time and became the career field manager for all of the medics in the Air National Guard. And then took over emergency, trauma, flight, disaster preparedness, oversaw that for a bunch of years. And then in 2013, Russ Armistead, our CEO, asked me if I would lead the project up here at the North.
So that, you can create events, you can create protocols, you can create initiatives that teach the character traits that it takes to be successful in life. And that's something that really is fulfilling to me. And I get to do it with the school district of Clay County, and get to work with all of our student athletes. So that's really why I do what I do, because I know what I do helps students, whether they choose to play professional sports or they choose to go into the workforce. When they leave Clay County schools, they're going to be prepared for life.
Time to transition into our first segment, The Rise, where we discuss how our interviewee progressed in their industry to eventually fill a leadership position.
After entering the workforce, your early 20s, how long did it take you to realize that being a healthcare professional was a role that you wanted to make a career?
I actually went in the Air Force back in 1982, so I could become and joined in 81. And, but I was going to be a air traffic controller.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And, that's when, President Reagan actually, had, fired all of the air traffic controllers way before your time, Jake. But your mom and dad remember.
Sure they'll know.
And he fired them all because they went on strike.
Oh, okay.
And so thought it was a really good opportunity to go into air traffic control, not really knowing what it was. Right. But in the meantime, once I was in basic training for that, we couldn't get my clearance, couldn't get done because my mom is a naturalized citizen from Greece. So it was going to take a whole lot longer to get the clearance to become a air traffic controller. So they said I could either get discharged, an honorable discharge, or I could become a medic.
Oh, nice.
And I chose to become a medic since I'd already gone through all basic and all that. So became a medic, and I will tell you, it probably didn't take long. I loved it, became an EMT, became a paramedic very quickly, moved from the medical units to the emergency room. Loved it in the emergency room, actually got lucky and got promoted pretty early and became a shift leader. And I think at that point in time is when I realized that, leadership was something I probably have in me. And I think leading by example is what it's all about. I would never ask anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And I really believe in leading with integrity, service before self, and excellence in all that I do. And surround myself with people who are a lot smarter than me. And I truly learned that at a pretty young age when I worked in that emergency room, and I had some of the best medics and best docs that there are. And we had quite a successful team back then.
Seems kind of like that falling out of becoming an air traffic controller kind of played to your advantage.
Probably couldn't have played any better than, and since then we've taken it, to go into IDM, Independent Duty Medic School, and then becoming the career field manager for all the medics, and that was a whole lot. And then once I decided to retire, I had the opportunity to come down here to Jacksonville. So I only worked for two people my whole life: the United States Air Force and U of Health. So
those are two of the best.
That's it.
What do you find is the hardest thing to balance in both your professional and your personal life?
Well, I just had my wife and I just had our first son, Charlie. He was born in October, so he's 8 months old. And, I think the real hard thing about balance is being present. It's real easy to be present with work. You have a cell phone. I mean, you don't put it down, and you're always present with the job. And one of the things I've really, really tried to do is when I get home, just totally put the phone away, and when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm at home, I'm at home. Instead of creating an experience for my student athletes, I need to be creating experiences for my family, and that's something that I've really tried to do, but it's extremely hard, especially growing up, with Major League Baseball being a goal. It's kind of made me very goal oriented in everything. But it's easy not to be goal-oriented with your family because they're kind of always there, in a good way. It's easy to kind of take advantage of that. So I would say the biggest thing is learning how to be present with what I'm doing right now.
A long time ago, I learned how to climb a rock wall. And when I learned that, you have 4 limbs, 2 hands, 2 legs, and you have to have 3 of those in contact with the world at all time. And so while you're climbing, you have to have 1 hand and 2 feet, or 2 hands and 1 foot, or whatever. As long as you have 3 points of contact with the world. I think about that in my life, and I think that balance is important, and I don't think we talk about it enough. In the body, there's a thing called homeostasis. It's the delicate balance between the acid-base balance in the body. And I tell you all that, in that I think we have 4 limbs to climb the wall, but I also think we have 4 things in our life that are very important to us, and that's our family, and that's our friends, and that's our work, and that's our faith, or whatever we believe in. We don't have to talk about, but those 4 things, and that those 4 things, of them, 3 things have to be in contact with the world at all times.
I heard that analogy. I love that.
I just thought about it.
That's really good.
When you get old, you start to philosophize.
Yeah, hey, I can definitely see it. That's good stuff. The person you are today, do you think you could have excelled in another industry?
I liked the traditions of the Navy. My dad was Navy, and his brothers and his dad, they were all Air National Guard. So
I think, it's funny. I had a conversation with someone the other day about when you're a leader or you're a CEO or an executive director or whatever it may be, you really shouldn't necessarily hire someone based on their previous qualifications necessarily. I mean, you have to take that into consideration, but ultimately you're hiring people because of their skill set and their ability, whether that's teamwork ability or leadership ability or critical thinking ability.
Leadership is leadership no matter what field you're in. I think it helped. Does it help me to be sitting here in this vice president job and actually know how to clinically treat somebody, and to understand the medications, and to understand the course of treatment, and to understand the continuity of care and everything, the continuum of care, to do it? Sure, it makes a big difference that I understand the clinical aspect, I think. Mm-hmm. Is it necessary? No.
I'm very familiar with the military lifestyle, and I like the structure of it. That might have even been where some of my leadership training began, really.
And just because I'm medical doesn't mean I can't go and run an organization someplace else. I don't I don't think it would stop me. I think leading is leading. And if you have it and people follow, because you can think you're leading, but if nobody's following you, you ain't leading nothing. So, but I think I think it crosses all bear. I don't think there's a lot of great leaders who couldn't tell you how to even start a computer, and they run computer companies.
Right.
And that's the truth.
I'm a big believer that people that are great can be great in any platform. And if anything, I'm a huge believer that great leaders can lead anyone, whether it's in the military or in the business world or, in a church or whatever it may be. People that have leadership ability can lead all kinds of people.
It's just whether or not people are following you and whether they believe you and whether because making decisions are surrounding yourself with people who help you do that.
Right.
You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be an expert. That's why there's not doctors that run hospitals. There's some doctors that run hospitals and they're great leaders, but just because you're a doctor don't mean you should be running a hospital. So you think about it that way. And so can I cross over I feel pretty comfortable that I could.
A leader without any followers is someone simply going on a walk.
I just don't know what else I'd do because I love the medical field.
Right. You never really. Yeah. So great leadership can kind of transfer over to pretty much any industry.
I think so. I have no doubt because I've seen it happen.
Okay.
I've seen people go from one line of service, one business model to another business and be very successful. And it's because people see what their leaders like.
Yeah. Do you feel like that you had a quality that set you apart in terms of being a professional player? So you kind of touched on how what set you apart from other high school players that let you play college. From college to pro, what set you apart from those players?
I have a relentless work ethic. I'm not the most talented. I'm not the smartest. I'm definitely not in the best shape of the other guys out on the field. But the thing that I think was consistent throughout my career, and hopefully I've remained consistent in my professional career, is my work ethic. I will not be outworked, whether it's showing up on time or being very punctual and paying attention to the small details. One of my coaches in professional baseball used to say, if you really want to experience growth, the things that take no ability, be the best at. And I've really kind of lived by that. And I never put it to words until he said that. I said, you know what? I think I do that pretty well.
Our next segment is The Dive, where we descend into the depths of our leaders' personal thoughts towards our changing workforce and society as a whole.
And this is sort of the point of this series, That Gray Area. There tends to be a small gray area that many leaders in any industry kind of operate in to remain ethical, empathetic to diversity, and just to remain kind of socially acceptable to today's kind of standards and expectations. Do you feel that while remaining ethical and socially appropriate is important, is there something that the youth is missing out on, or our workforce is just missing out on?
If I think about that, I don't know. I don't really think they're missing out on much because they're probably more well-rounded in other things. Gotcha. Back in my day, we were working. I do probably admire the balance.
I think it depends. I think it depends on the company, on the goals of the organization. I think where leaders miss the boat is that you can do both. You can respect others, you can provide opportunities, but at the end of the day, like from a business perspective, if you're a business owner, you should have one goal, and that is to make a profit. Because if that's not your main goal, you're not going to be a business for very long.
I think that when you are not open to what people are trying to tell you, and you just feel like you are being attacked, or how can you grow?
In education, you should have one goal: to educate students. And if you have any other agenda or any other goal than that, then you're doing the students a disservice. There's got to be high standards in life. We have to have high standards for ourselves. We have to have high standards for our family, high standards for the people that we lead. And I think, once again, you can do both.
And if you can't have those types of conversations either, to where they're productive, where maybe there is some back and forth with an open mind, you're also failing to really learn or grow. Because there's more than one way to think.
So how exactly do you go about interacting, and I want to call it leader-member exchange is kind of how I refer to it. What do you find is the best way to approach these individuals to get them to respond the way you want them to?
It's a matter of opinion and morals. Company culture is such a very important thing that most people have to bypass now.
Not everybody on the team has the same level of need. So it's important for you to tailor your need based on that person's, or tailor your coaching, so to speak, based on that person's level of need.
With all your different generations or age groups, building relationships is the most important thing. When you build a relationship with your employee and you let them know that you care, they tend to be more receptive to what you have to say.
I truly don't think you have to.
Okay.
I think if you're a true leader and you do things with integrity, in other words, doing the right thing all the time, whether somebody's looking at, that you treat people with respect, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what. If you do that, I don't think you have to worry about the hypersensitivity.
No, you got them from then on. But you always be honest with them, give them cold, hard facts.
With these newer, more sensitive ones, it's even more important to have that relationship with them first.
You're not going to teach your best player the same way you teach your worst player. But it's important as a leader that you give the same amount of effort to the best player as you do to the worst player. So in a long roundabout answer to that question, I think it's possible, but it depends on the leader.
I took time with my associates to kind of listen to the challenges that they face in life, whether it be at home or at school, or even their relationship drama. I would take time and I would offer advice in that if that was something that was asked for.
Because that's the key, is you want to show people how much you care. And that comes whether they're hypersensitive or not. Is this a different generation? Do we have a couple different generations since my generation? We sure do. As far as adjusting, I think probably more operationally we adjust, because I think about the new generation and they want to work, but they want to play. And so you have to balance that.
And then also I would share my faults or challenges that I faced as a leader, or in that position, oh yeah, hey, I messed up too doing this, and
To kind of relate to them.
yeah, exactly. And so that kind of helped with building the relationship, so where they're a little bit more open to what I had to say.
The cold, hard facts. If you do this, this is going to happen.
Right.
And you have to fall back on your experience and common sense and the way things work.
You can be respectful, but you shouldn't lower the standards to appease someone's feelings. And I think that is happening in our nation a lot. And you're seeing a big shift. And I necessarily don't agree with it. I mean, for me, I agree with the best person that's going to lead the organization should get the job. Whether, no matter their race, their ethnicity, their religious background, their beliefs, none of that should matter. What should matter is who can be the most effective, who's going to lead others, and who's ultimately going to get the job done.
And then we still have the generation that has kids, and they have young ones, and you got to be flexible with schedules. All of those things, I think, are just natural things that happen that you think, well, does it really matter? Sometimes working from home. I wasn't, that was probably one of the biggest things I had a hard time with, was thinking about people working from home, because that's not anywhere in my realm.
Right.
And I've come around. I think there are positions that people can do the job from home, and we can have some accountability for them.
It's clear that times are different now, and remote positions are more accessible to these days than they may have been whenever you were selling shoes in 1901.
Yeah, 1901.
That's what it was.
Yeah, feels like it.
Keep in mind, this is my grandfather, so.
And once they feel like they have been heard and understood, then potentially you can start to have those hard talks with them, and you may not change their mind or you're not going to necessarily give them this aha moment, but they might actually get a little bit of buy-in that you need from them at that point.
Jocko Willink is a former Navy SEAL, and he has a podcast, and he calls your gray area the dichotomy of leadership. You have to be able to have high standards, but not be a control freak. You have to be able to get on to people, but not demean them. You have to be able to give people praise, but not let them fall on their heels so they stop working hard. And this is the gray area that you're talking about, that it takes time and it takes a lot of different experiences to kind of master how to operate in that gray area.
Are going and saying, hey, Jake, great job getting the lot cleared of all their shopping carts, but you missed that one over there. They're not going to backhanded compliment. Yeah, they're going to be like, they're only going to hear you missed something, right? And they think, this guy doesn't appreciate you. Yeah. And so that was something that I had to learn. Was just how you got to be careful not to cancel out your compliment. I like that beforehand.
If the devil can give you 98% fantastic stock advice, you're invited to dinner.
Okay, I agree. I think so.
So I don't have to walk on eggs normally. I might have to walk on eggs to get there. Mm-hmm. But I don't have to walk on eggs to stay.
It's all about aptitude and retention. And the thing is, a lot of people have aptitude, but they don't have retention. Mm-hmm. So do you have the aptitude to convey the technique and the skill that I'm telling you, which a lot of people do? The problem is how many people do you, as a leader, do you have to go back and tell them again, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the retention piece. So we heard that a lot with the Dodgers is aptitude and retention. We know you know how to do it. Can you do it day in and day out?
What is popular is not always right. What is right is always popular. So that can be challenging when you get promoted into a position at the same store where these people who are your friends and your equals, now like all of a sudden you're in this position of authority, and so you now have to try to get them to buy into what you're telling them to do.
You maintain your level of effort, and ultimately you maintain your strategic mission of the organization. That's got to be number one. So you've got to know the why of what you do, and then more importantly, the how. Everybody can tell you what the goal is, but most people can't tell you how they're going to do it. And that's going back to aptitude and retention. That's the part that people miss the boat.
And I think for people who aren't doing the right thing, who are sticklers, who are black and white, who can't, think out of the box, probably are going to have a hard time with that. And I think if you have a more well-rounded approach and you realize that leadership, once again, is being a leader no matter who it is. I learned a long time ago, I don't know the key to success, but I know the key to failure is trying to please everyone. Oh. So I know I can't please everyone. I know there's going to be some people who just think, Mr. Martin, he just not. The key is don't concentrate on them. Continue to do the right thing. Concentrate on the people who are doing the right thing all the time. Concentrate, take care of them. The NCO in charge. Mr. Gary Wallace. He was a tech sergeant at the time, and he also took us and showed us stuff. So he wouldn't just tell us to look at a rhythm on a heart. He would take us in his office and sit down and show us where that beat was coming from and what each one of those little lines meant and the physiology behind it. Wow. And so that's when I also like my teacher stuff, is that he did that. And he didn't keep all the information. Too many leaders, then they're not leaders. They keep the stuff to themselves. Too many managers. They keep the information to themselves and they don't give it out to others. And I will tell you, that's a big heartburn that I have, is anybody who takes the credit for themselves when it's really a whole team that does that.
So it's very important to make sure that everyone understands the strategic mission, that they buy into the strategic mission, and then you execute from there.
There's never anything I've done that was just me, ever. And so he taught us that. And he took every bit of knowledge he had and take that to everybody else. So leading by example, giving people all that you got, and then showing them how much you care.
And our final segment, Beyond the Black and White, in which we will determine how our leaders have been able to truly operate successfully in that gray area.
Recall a specific encounter or life lesson that has led you to be the leader that you are today, in which maybe it might be conducted a little differently if it did take place today.
So I had this associate. At the time, every 6 months we did performance evaluations. And so we would sit down, one-on-one privately with the associate, and we would go through the evaluation, talk about each factor. And there is guidance for each factor. Publix provides us with what we call factor definitions. So it says, what they should be doing to qualify for the different numbers. It's graded on a number scale. And so I kind of did a lot of copy and paste, oh yeah, they don't do this. So sometimes fails to do this.
Right.
Sometimes fails to do this. That's not going to work with any person out inside at any age group.
When I first went in the Air Force and then became a medic, got stationed at Andrews Air Force Base at Malcolm Grill Medical Center, and I was working on the medical unit, and I saw these guys in the emergency room who looked like they were pretty shit hot. They were walking, they were great medics. You could tell just by the way they carried themselves, by the way they acted when they had an emergency, the way they responded. I said, I want to do that right there. And so I went to paramedic school and did all that.
I had a associate who had been with Publix for, I want to say 30 years at that point. So she's very well seasoned. And so I sit down with this seasoned associate who was kind of just old school in her ways. Very knowledgeable, but just wasn't doing things the way that they needed to be done according to public standards today, not according to old ways.
Right.
So I sit down with her and I start reading this evaluation, and I see her eyes get all teary, and I can tell her face is red. She is mad. She gets up in the middle of it, and she clocks out, and goes home. So obviously it didn't go well.
Right.
And then I went to the emergency room. So less than a year, I was in the emergency room working, and the youngest, in there. I hadn't even been a medic for less than a year. I got to work in the emergency room because I did all. Then I became a shift supervisor pretty quickly. And what I remember is, and this sticks with me, is we had a trauma in bed 1. And we were in there, and we had another trauma come in, and we were in there, and we were going back and forth. So we got these 2 trauma beds were working.
And then 6 months later it comes around, and it's time to get this lady evaluation. Still not seeing the change that I wanted. I put that off to the very last minute. I think the day that the evaluations were due is when I finally did it. And I remember that morning, I had been dreading having to sit down with her. And that morning, I'm like, if I give this evaluation and nothing comes of it, then we're just wasting our time. So I've got to find a way to make this productive. And so I remember that morning Googling, defensive people.
And then we were done. And the place is a mess. And it's something simple. But I grabbed the broom and I started cleaning things up. I was shift supervisor. But I grabbed the broom, I started cleaning things up.
We sit down. I had this evaluation that I'd already written, and it was basically written with the same language as before. The numbers are not scores that she's going to like. And I just put it down face down. I said, we're not going to go do this. We're just going to talk. And she's like, oh, okay.
Never asked anybody to do anything. And the next thing I turned around, everybody else was picking up stuff here, was getting stuff here, was getting the patient set up. Everybody started doing stuff. Didn't say a word.
And so I used the factors as kind of a guide. So, first one's engaging customers. So tell me what, how you feel about, where you are with engaging customers, how you've done. And so she was a little taken back, but basically I was letting her voice how she felt about her own performance.
Right. And that's why when I led with lead by example, it was probably the first time where I saw that I didn't need to tell people what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You just show them,
Yeah.
and they'll do it. And most of the time, they'll do it much better than you even thought it could be done. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to realize. So probably that was one of my, and I was a young airman in the Air Force, but that's what I learned, and I ran through it.
When we get down to the harder things where she was not meeting the standards, and let her explain, where she thought she was. And I said, okay, I agree. I think that you do these things well. Here's kind of where I think that could be a little bit better, and I'd like to see some improvement. And it kind of just led to a conversation where there was that back and forth, and allowed for some compromise.
What advice would you give a mid-level employee in today's workforce, and kind of in your industry specifically, that seeks to occupy a similar leadership position as you?
Sure.
What advice would you give them?
There's 3 things that I would say. Number 1, be a sponge. You have to be a lifelong learner. You have to constantly be learning from others. You got to remain humble. And like I said, literally try to learn as much as you can every single day. The day that you think you have it figured out is the day you need to quit. So really be a sponge.
Be curious. So you want to be knowledgeable in your field. When I was customer service manager, when those cashiers became customer service staff, now they have access to the computer. And there are a lot of resources on there that help you to do your job better.
I like cliches and mottos, and I love them. And most of my personal life and all of my professional life, I've lived by many of these cliches. They've kept me on track and grounded. And some of my favorites are, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Confucius said that, but what he's saying is, if you got something to do, take the first step.
Probably the number one advice I get, because I do have the opportunity to have a lot of interns and fellows and mid-level managers, and everybody wants to go to the top, and everybody wants to have is take care of people, show them how much you care, but also realize it's going to take time.
Number 2, don't be scared to ask questions. For me personally, I've asked CEOs of companies, owner of businesses, people that really I was like, they're way out of my league. They don't even deserve to talk. I don't deserve to talk to them. And they've been some of my biggest assets by reaching out to them. They want to help you. These business owners, these leaders, they want to help you. So reach out. And the networking that you will do when you have the courage to ask questions and introduce yourself to people will take you further than you could ever imagine. But when you sit in silence, you're not going to learn, and you're not going to build your network.
Whether that's offering assistance to customers, answering questions from associates, there is a lot of resources on them. So there's certain things that we teach you. We teach you how to do your job with the register and the computer systems that we have to use in the back. But there's those things in between, and so that's where I was telling them, be curious, explore this website. It's what we call a connection. It's got all the resources you need on there. Like, explore it, be curious, see what everything does. Because then when that question pops up and goes, somebody says, "Hey, how do I apply for a tuition reimbursement?" Oh, I know exactly how to do that. It's right here. Let me show you. So it's going to help you to be more valuable.
Things happen not on your time frame. Things happen in the time frame for the company.
Finally, the third thing, always go with your gut and do the right thing. When you're feeling societal pressure and you're feeling pressure for someone to lean you the wrong way or something that's away from your moral compass, have the courage to do the right thing. I think this day and age in our nation, there's too many people that are going with the popular decision and not the right decision. So make sure that you have that strong moral compass, you know your why, and you follow your heart.
When I got out of the Air Force and came here after I retired, for the first year, almost 2 years, I was in the same job. Thought maybe I should start moving up a little, because in the Air Force, I moved very fast. I mean, I moved up. I was pretty lucky.
You're kind of used to that.
Yeah, so I was used to taking tests, going before a board, having people see me, get me promoted, and I had all those stripes on my sleeves by, 16 years in. I was chief master sergeant. So that's what I was used to. Here, it moves a lot slower.
And another was find a career that you love. You'll never have to go to work. I've always felt like that. If you ask my wife today, and I've been in the fashion business for 47 years, if you ask my wife, what does your husband do for a living? Without a smile, she'll tell you, he visits with his friends.
Must be nice.
It's very nice.
So what I tell people, start at a certain point in time, give it time, do the right thing, build up your reputation, not by what you do, but how you help people and work with people, and people will see it and it'll come. But it's also not going to happen overnight. You know, I spent how many years in emergency and trauma before I got to take this? Almost 9 years in the same position before I got to do this. And then from here, it grew from there. It does take time. Don't get frustrated. And you have to start someplace.
Right.
And most of the time you're starting at the bottom and you're working your way up. If you're good, people will see it. I have no doubt.
It's kind of a component of patience in that process.
That's it. Have lots of patience.
So it's safe to say that you've kind of found your niche and how to approach these things. You kind of operate in that gray area.
John, that wraps up our interview here.
Nick, that's pretty much, that's all I got for you today. That's great stuff. Thank you so much again for kind of sitting down with us and going over some of these questions and different areas of leadership. Again, this is Wayne Marshall. I hope to, learn a lot from what you're saying and apply that myself. But it's very clear that he has found his niche. He operates in that gray area that a lot of us are not.
There you have it, folks. Although the participants in these interviews only represent a small fraction of our workforce's leadership base, I find the perspective as to how to navigate the waters of our more fragile society to be invaluable. And being that I myself interact with and witness on a daily basis leaders expressing similar viewpoints and demonstrate similar leadership approaches, I don't see it as biased or invalid to insist that they're not alone in the opinions that they express in these interviews. Being able to gain insight directly from the mouth of someone who successfully applies leadership on a daily basis really allows you to perceive leadership in an entirely different light. And it's not necessarily brighter, it's just different. This journey into that gray area has truly proven beneficial to my overall personal knowledge of leadership, and I hope you were able to benefit as well. And although worded differently and quite possibly unintentionally referenced, much of the content conveyed in the responses from our interviewees directly align with much of the information that I was able to gain from my time spent as a student in the leadership program at Regent University. And although this journey was initially intended to serve as my doctoral project and a unique way to enhance my personal perspective about leadership altogether, there was an even greater lesson that I was able to take from all of this that I never expected to. And that is that
our world is changing. And although most of us with a pulse are fully aware of this, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are doing what is necessary to accommodate for this change. And that's fine, that's entirely up to you. But if you do make that choice, you can't expect the rest of the world to remain still with you. Think of it this way. You wouldn't expect a phone from 50 years ago to perform the same functions as a phone released today. Sure, it might allow you to call your parents or your best buddy, but that's about it. There is a flip side to that thought process, though. Where would we be if that older phone model never existed? You see, that foundation is necessary. Progress and innovation is just a fallacy without something to move forward from. And neglecting to consider what lies between the black and white, well, I say that's a problem altogether. That gray area isn't just some clever way of labeling a documentary. It's not even specific to the workforce. It's so much bigger and more important than that. It's those people that you come home to every day that give you the motivation to wake up tomorrow. It's that past trauma that someone experienced that ultimately led to their caution or worry today. It's that job they were doing before doing the job they do now. It's that little bit of information under the surface that we didn't know existed just before we make a quick judgment about them. It's every little experience that took place that led you to this moment. Truth is, no matter how badly we want to believe it, we've never lived in a world that black and white. We've always lived in, well, I think you get the picture now.
If you were asked to summarize your journey inside and outside of work as a person in a fashion that kind of encourages others, maybe in the form of a motto or life quote, like you said, you live kind of by cliches and quotes and mottos, what would that motto be, just to sum up that your whole journey?
I don't think you put it in one motto. I think it's a series of mottos and cliches. And if you live by those, I probably got 10 or 12 that would be apropos to this. I think still the best one. If you get a job that you like, you'll never have to go to work. I think that's it. I'm a happy man. And I can't wait to see my friends.